Hello and welcome to the lifestyle segment of Women to Watch. I'm Cheri Morrison. Today I have the pleasure of introducing founder and executive director of the Mind Your Brain Foundation, Candace Gantt. Welcome to the show, Candace.
Thank you, Cheri. It's really an honor to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, I'm very happy you could join us. Candace is a traumatic brain injury, also known as TBI survivor. Candace, you've had a difficult path and have demonstrated a great deal of resilience. Before we get into that, let's go back to the beginning. Please tell us about where you're from and your education.
Thanks, Cheri. So I'm from Akron, Ohio, better known as Barberton, Ohio, until I was about 13 years old. And then we were transported into New York and New York City and the surrounding areas with my dad's job change. So I was in Tarrytown, New York, then for another 10 or 20 years. I went to college in Pennsylvania because I was working my way back to the Midwest. And that's where I had my formal education at Clarion University and then started my career.
And you headed straight to New York after you finished college. That's always a big step, going to the big city right after you finished college. So what did you do for your career?
And so when I had my resume in my hand with my marketing and management degree. And like everyone else, I was pounding the pavement looking for that wonderful job that paid lots, that had extraordinary pay and good benefits. And as it turned out, there was a big banner across the Hyatt that was just renovated. And they were looking for managers. And so I jumped at the chance. I walked in with all my confidence, and I was hired as a supervisor in the housekeeping department. Was my first job out of college, working for the Hyatt Hotel Company. And then I was promoted to a management position and then a front desk manager. And that started my trajectory. That's a tough word for me today. Going forward and launch my career.
Oh, that's exciting. So how long did you end up with the hotel chain?
So I was with Hyatt Hotels. I was asked to open hotels for them in exciting places like Greenville, South Carolina, Knoxville, Tennessee. I was in Miami and then to San Francisco. So I moved 4 times in 5 years because they were looking for someone who had the expertise that I was developing at the time. And so I was with Hyatt Hotels for 5 years. And then I had an opportunity to work for Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company.
Oh, wow. And what did you do for them?
So I started as an assistant manager. I started as a manager for housekeeping and also for the front office, and then all of the front office operations, security, bellman, doorman, and it's called a operations manager. And again, they're asked me to open hotels, so I went all around the world opening hotels in Barcelona, in the Pacific Rim, in Asia, Hong Kong, Australia, San Francisco. And then I was asked to head up a new operation for international. It's an international position that ran all of the reservations operations for the company.
Wow.
So I went back to Atlanta where I ended my 10 years with Ritz-Carlton in that position.
Wow. That's quite a journey, and what a great way to see the world. And then you met Mr. Wonderful and moved to Pennsylvania and started a family. When your children were 4 and 10, you decided to get back into running, which is something you participated and really enjoyed in high school. What happened that changed your path?
Yes, thanks. And that's true. That really was my, not formally, but I was always a runner. I could always beat my brother at running, and everyone in the neighborhood always wanted to be on the street football team because I could run so fast. And I translated that into my passion. I started a family with Mr. Wonderful, as you said. And I read an article in the local newspaper that talked about a woman who was 50 years old and she was a triathlete. She swam, bike, and ran. And I thought, I can do that. I can go jump in a pool, and I love my bike. And so I started on that journey. I had run a couple marathons and I really enjoyed, I knew I was proficient at that and I enjoyed it. And I started to swim and I started to bike. And then I, of course, then wanted to compete because I think that's where my goals in life come from, is that I'm a competitor. I enjoy that environment and I rise to it. And so I started to compete in half Ironman and marathons, ran Boston Marathon. And that's really what started that trajectory in my love of outdoor sports.
those are huge commitments to make, well, especially while you're raising your family. So apparently you were out one day for just a nice ride on your bike, and
And the
bam,
world changed. And the
world
world
changed
changed.
on a dime. What happened?
That was in 2005, July 21st. So it was a glorious day. I had just finished a half Ironman competition in Lake Placid, New York. And I had the wind blowing through my hair with my helmet on. And I was riding my bike with a dear friend of mine. We were on a country road in Chester County in Pennsylvania, and a car came up behind me. It's actually a construction vehicle with a trailer on the back that had a cement mixer. And it came up behind me, and as it went over a 2-lane road, there was a car coming up the other direction. He pulled into my lane and clipped my bike. And at that time, I was, as timing would have it, I was at a telephone pole. So I was launched into that telephone pole at 30 miles an hour, and then onto a stockade fence, and then onto the asphalt. And that was the change that was the moment in history that changed everything after.
Wow. Wow.
So I was airlifted to Penn Medicine, where I was diagnosed immediately because I was flailing and not speaking, that I had a traumatic brain injury.
Wow. So how long did it take you to go through your treatments and start to, because you had more than a brain injury. You said the bones were broken in your face. You weren't able to walk. I mean, you had a lot of challenges to face.
Yes, that was, and it's a long journey, I will say, for anyone that's watching this that's a traumatic brain injury or a concussion, even a mild traumatic brain injury, have some deficits that mirror each other. They're very similar in the reaction the brain has to trauma. So when I was airlifted to Penn Medicine, in order to facilitate the swelling of my brain, they did what's considered a craniotomy. They removed my skull plate and allowed my brain to expand. And what that launched me into a coma if I wasn't there already. And so I spent 2 weeks in a coma, and then a step down unit, and then on to rehabilitation.
Wow.
That's the long journey that I was on to walk and talk again.
Yeah. So then in 2015, which was 10 years after medical treatment, you had completed the acute and rehabilitative stages of care for a TBI, but you knew you were still not 100% or the person you were before the injuries. You were overwhelmed by the battles that you faced, which most people didn't even realize you struggled with or were even a thing. You spoke with your neurologist, Dr. Grady, and asked him, where do you go from here? Where can you get help? And this is how the Mind Your Brain Foundation was founded. At Dr. Grady's suggestion and with his guidance, you created a formal network of services for survivors who already passed the acute and rehab stages of care and created a new level of rehabilitation options for a lifetime of improvement.
That's so true, Cheri, that there was a dearth, there was a gap. We often call it falling off a cliff when you actually are discharged from rehabilitation center and you're considered high functioning, which you're very proud of. You have executive function, you feel pretty good about yourself. Maybe I'm smarter now than I was when I went in. But the reality of it is that it's really a low bar that I could tie my shoes, but I wasn't able to take care of my family. I was overwhelmed with decisions. There's cognitive challenges I have, and behavioral challenges, still had physical challenges, crushed on my facial bones, my shoulder. And so it's a long journey. And when I went to Dr. Grady, he made the recommendation that I work with the Center for Brain Injury and Repair that's at Penn as well, and work with them to actually conduct and design a patient-centric conference for other brain injury survivors that are still suffering mightily and there's no hope. Where do I go? Do I do the Google search, the font of all wisdom, to try to find help for a traumatic brain injury deficits you have? And that's not a good way to get your health care. And so we designed this conference specifically to help that population.
Yeah, so this is your 8th year that you have the Mind Your Brain Foundation, and you have 5 locations: Philadelphia, Lancaster, Reading, and Allentown, all with a connection to Penn. And then you have a location in Houston, where you held a conference just before the pandemic. And I know you got there somehow through a gentleman who was going to school at Penn and then had an accident with a brain injury and moved to Houston. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. He was a student. He's a freshman at the University of Pennsylvania. And in his college wisdom, he climbed the outside of his building, his dorm, and fell off and was treated by Penn Medicine. He went home for his rehabilitation to Houston. And a couple months later, I was introduced to him and he said, we need this resource in Houston. And he and I developed and made all the contacts and put on the conference in Houston for the first time.
That's great. Well, you have these fantastic conferences, which are free to all. You have 4 organized between now and the fall. The next one is this coming weekend, March 25th, and runs from 8:30 a.m. until 3 p.m. at the Jordan Medical Education Center at Penn. Please tell us about the conferences, workshops, speakers, and all. And I'm sorry we're getting short on time here, and what they include.
Right. And so there's a keynote speaker, but I think the most important thing is that you get help and hope. We have a panel of researchers, and they will tell you about what research is going on. That's the hope part of it. And the help part of it is workshops. So we have physicians, clinicians, world-known experts that will actually work in a variety of areas to give you a takeaway, an aha moment. I didn't recognize that I had this deficit, and now I know how to get help for it. Yeah. Or I have emotional regulation. There's some brilliant people that in our community that can help me with that challenge I have. So we connect all those resources to give back to the community and help them on their journey.
That's great. That's great. Well, and as you mentioned to me, your mission is to let people know that have these debilitating situations is we see you and you can help them. You can be their support and have their back. Yes. I'm sorry we're out of time. For more information, thank you so much for your time and for taking the time to build the Mind Your Brain Foundation. I know thousands of people appreciate the work that you've done and the voice that you've given them.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I thank you for this opportunity to bring awareness to brain injury survivor community.
My pleasure. For more information about the Mind Your Brain Foundation, or if you're interested in learning more about or attending the conference in Philadelphia on Saturday, March 25th, other upcoming conferences, which I mentioned, are free, or if you would like to make a monetary donation to help advance awareness, research, treatment, and education to improve the quality of life for all people affected by brain injury, and to continue these free conference options, go to www.mindyourbrainfoundation.org. Thank you again. Sue will be right back to close out the show. Ladies, keep living your dreams.